In progress with Mari Assad on Play It Forward. Mari, thank you for being on the show. You are the filmmaker, writer, director, actor of The Dark Essence.
Yes, thank you for having me.
For sure. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah,
Or
so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, and or the work. I'm sorry.
I got excited. I'm Mari Assad. I'm a filmmaker. I'm LA based, and I have always grown up with a passion for comedy. Anything comedy, I have wanted to watch it, whether it was on screen, whether it was on stage, whether it was in a book. I just wanted comedy. And my problem was I was always cast in dramas. And after a while, I was like, you know what? I'm done. Like, I'm going to start writing my own comedies. And that's what I want to do so that I can start being in the material that I want. And I fell in love with writing. I always say, I was like, it's a rom-com. We were set up together and we just kind of, we got along since our first date. I had a web series. I would write some short plays. And then I kept having this idea buzz around of, um, just a comedy about a satanic group. And this started because I was in an improv class and someone told me that a satanic group was suing Netflix. And I heard it and I was like, that's a comedy and someone needs to write a script about that right away. And my teacher was like, you should do it, write a script. And I was like, oh, I will. I'll do it. I'll let you know. And so I started doing more research about it. And I think I was kind of looking a way to make fun of it. And I think I just kind of thought that's what I was doing. And then as I kept reading, I was like, oh, they're actually doing a lot of good deeds. They're doing more than I'm doing in my day-to-day
Is that
life.
right?
And
Wow.
yeah, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting that that's really something. And I was like to think about a satanic group doing a lot of good deeds. And I grew up in a very strict Mexican Catholic household. So there
Mm.
was a lot of religion, going to church every Sunday. So I knew I was like, oh, that would be funny to write this. And some people see it as a drama, but it's actually this comedy that's happening. And with everything going on in the news, everything happening from day to day, I was like, no, I think we need something like this. We need a comedy about religion. And so that was where Todd and Jim were born. And so I just loved the idea of two men in a satanic group who were doing good deeds. And I knew I wanted someone to balance that. And Rose is based off a family member who used to be a nun, and she's on in the front of the picket line. And I was like, well, what if they became friends with a nun? And I was like, what if that was their friendship? And that was the story, is this unlikely friendship of these two. And from there, it just started to write itself. And that was where the dark essence came from. Um,
Awesome.
yeah.
I mean, have, Satan is a great source of comedy. And I think one of the things there is that, I was just actually reading this guy named Steiner, and he writes about Satan, and Steiner was just like this prolific writer in the, I guess, 19th or 20th century or beginning of the
Mhm.
20th century. And he's responsible for a lot of different things. One of them is like the Waldorf school system and the dance movement and all the stuff. And he actually talks about, and he is Christian oriented, and he talks
Mhm.
about how Satan really got a bad rap. He's
Yeah.
misunderstood. And I think from kind of like what you're writing about and the theme and that woven in, it's like here are our expectations and our judgments and what's the truth, and so
Mhm.
you think Satan, you think these guys are sacrificing bunnies, but they're or people, or really mean people, and they're really not. These two guys
Mhm.
are very gentle people,
Yeah.
and they're trying to rally behind good causes, and they're not really invited into them because they have, they're people that feel like maybe they're prejudiced against Satanists, right? And so
Yeah.
you've taken this like spin on it. So spinning that kind of idea of our expectations, of our judgments about people, organizations, groups, our biases, and how they shape the way that we see things, that kind of thematically, where do you think that theme came from in your own experience?
I think so. I grew up with a lot of classical theater. I grew up with Shakespeare. and performing a lot of classical Shakespeare. And I always loved the way that Shakespeare in his soliloquies, when, whether it's Hamlet, whether it's Queen Margaret, whether it's Macker's, that there is a lot of like evil within, and how to fight that evil within, and then how to grow from that evil and moving out. So that was always something that I like registered with as a kid, which I know is very dark as like a 17-year-old thinking about these big things.
Not
Like,
really.
how
Yeah.
am I like, how am I moving? How is this moving through me? But
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
think you're alone.
and I think it just made it very personal. And that was something of a comedy that I wanted. I know when I told a few people, I was like, no, I want to do a comedy about a satanic group. And people were like, that can't be a comedy. Like, no, that's so dark. And I was like, well, all we've seen are dramas. What if we changed it and we made it a comedy? Like, we know the dark side of it. We know the unhappiness, but what if we actually saw the light side of this? What if we saw a friendship did come through this unlikely two groups of people? And that's always something I wondered, like, if Shakespeare characters like became were real people and became friends, who would be friends with who? And so that was something I think in the back of my head, like that was what Todd and Jim and Rose were. They were the unlikely friends of Shakespeare characters, like,
Okay.
and how
All
they
right.
would be there. And I think that's why I also love to bond with mockumentary, because like Shakespeare, they break the fourth wall and they talk to the audience. And that was something I really wanted. I love mockumentary. Like, yes, The Office, Parks and Rec, Modern Family. It is a comedy that we use, but I think it's such a beautiful tool to be able to break the fourth wall and talk to someone directly and like give that eye contact. And so that was some comedic but also dramatic moments that I truly loved and I thought were really great and played with the light and darkness of the subject matter that could be played out in a funny way and made it relatable.
Well, I definitely think the material is, ripe for comedy. And, in terms of like the thematic content, you have these polarized groups, and there's a lot of polarized groups, in our society. And it's like they just can't seem to get along, and
Yeah.
they're protesting. And there is this concept of um the angry protester or the angry
Mm,
pacifist. Like, you're fighting for peace, but you're angry about it. So it's kind of
mhm.
hard to, well, how are you going to get peace if you're, coming from peace? We must have peace, not.
Right.
So it's like, these all these polarized groups. And in your piece, there's a line that says, the Rose character says, "Hey, they're good. You guys are good boys with good intentions and good hearts. You should be friends." So all these polarized groups have their good intentions and good hearts, but they're having a hard time seeing one another. And that's kind of what I got out of it, is like, what's going on with these movements that are having a hard time, seeing whoever they are perceiving as the other, who isn't necessarily the other. So, with that kind of preface, what I'm trying to get at is, you as a viewer, what do you get out of it? What's your takeaway on the material, and maybe even the teaching that it offers?
Yeah, I especially with things happening currently, I think we forget that a small gesture can change someone's whole day. A small gesture can change someone's life. I think that the angry protester stereotype is something, and even myself, where I get so, you see so much happening on in the news, you see so much happening, and you want a wand that can fix it all. And so we get frustrated and maybe we'll go on social media. So we do that. But what I loved about Todd and Jim, and something that I am constantly reteaching myself, is it doesn't have to be a huge gesture to change all of the world. It can be something so small, gardening with your neighbor, something so small, like I can't fix world hunger, but I can buy my friend a coffee who's having a bad day, and I can listen to what's happening to them. And I can, like that's something that I
Yeah.
try to remember, where I'm like, that's how I can make a change. A lot of these little steps, these little changes will mount up to something bigger. And that's what's important. And that's how I choose to move forward in the chaos of this. And I think that Rose teaches Todd and Jim that lesson where she's like, you have good intentions. You just get lost in getting the message out. And she's like, but it's there. Just keep going with your good intention. So that's where I think like the heart of the dark essence is.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
I think what I hear is, hey, there is the horror that's going on in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and there is our immediate environment and what we can do now to change and make that a better reality for the people that we come across.
Mm-hmm.
And that is our responsibility to do. Not that the other isn't, or whatever your heart feels moved to do, and yet can't lose focus on what's in front of you and the people that need
Mm-hmm.
us now, that are next to us.
Yeah.
um yeah,
And that's like the foreground of building a community, which is what
yeah,
Todd and Jim wanted to do. And
exactly,
so yeah.
exactly, building a community, totally. And that has ripple effects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And I do appreciate that. Because I think it's easy to get lost in the causes and kind of overlook the immediacy of the person that's next to us.
Yeah.
Um, since making the movie, how has your life been changed personally?
Ooh, so many. I mean, I think it was like such a beautiful thing to see this. I told everyone, I was like, this is my little baby that I'm bringing up, and we're getting him ready. He's gonna go off to college. And so like seeing it on the film was possibly, or seeing it like on a film was one of the greatest feelings. I think having people laugh at the jokes was like my heart and soul, where I was like, yes, that was
Yeah,
funny. I knew
yeah,
it. It's like,
yeah.
and seeing like which one people bonded with. But so much, I think the greatest thing since it's come out has been so many people coming to me, one saying you were right, that was a comedy, and I'm glad you went with it. And I was like, yeah. But two was people asking me like, what are you going to do next? And I was like, ooh, now they're asking me like, what am
Yeah.
I going to do next? And so it was, I think the Dark Essence was a great uh film to like start to pave the way, and kind of open my mind to like, well, what else do I want to talk about that I can put down in a script and create that.
Yes.
So that's kind of been the fun part of like, what more do I see with the Dark Essence, but what other avenues do I want to go down?
Well, I'm hearing confidence and courage.
Yeah.
Does that ring true to you?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Mari Assad, filmmaker, writer, director of an actor in The Dark Essence.
Yes.
Thank you so much
Thank
for being
you.
on the show. It is a very cute movie, and we'll share links and etc. And the actors were great. And hey, if you want to share any more stuff, we look forward to your next project.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
All right, it was fun. Thank you for being here. Everybody,
Thank
peace out.
you.
I'll play it
Have a
forward.
good one.